Yo, what is going on, guys? It is Nick here, back again with a brand new video today. We're going to be continuing my series which I review every single Marvel Cinematic Universe film up to the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Today we're going to be reviewing Avengers: Infinity War, which is the 7th film in Phase 3. So Avengers: Infinity War was directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, and I'm not even going to go into the cast because it has pretty much everybody that we've met so far there. So I just have in my notes, it has everyone. It has everyone that we met in Avengers and Avengers: Age of Ultron, the Guardians of the Galaxy. It also has Doctor Strange, as well as some characters from that, and Black Panther and some characters from that. The only exceptions is that we don't see Ant-Man or any of Ant-Man's characters or Hawkeye. Aside from that, everybody's there. Everyone that we met in, like I said, Avengers, Avengers of Ultron, Guardians Volume 2, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, all those characters are there. So everybody that we met in those movies, here in this film. So I'm not going to go into the cast, as this video would be way too long, and I'm not going to do that to you. I will, however, talk about some performances that we've never seen before, the most obvious one being Josh Brolin as Thanos. Now, we did technically see a little bit of him from the post-credit scene in the Avengers, and we saw some tease of him in Guardians of the Galaxy, and we saw another post-credit scene with him in Avengers: Age of Ultron, but we never really saw him as a character in those movies. We just saw him as little teases here and there. This is the first time that Thanos is actually an important central part of the story, and so that's why I'm going to talk about it. And Josh Brolin as Thanos, oh good lord, what an amazing, incredible performance that Josh Brolin gave as Thanos, as well as just how well written the villain is all around. I mean, if you know Marvel, you know that Thanos is, like, hands down the best villain that we've had thus far in the MCU. I know Loki's awesome, and I know Killmonger's awesome, but man, Thanos is just, he's the GOAT. Thanos is the GOAT. He's the best villain that the MCU's had so far, even years after Infinity War's come out. I think that still stands the opinion that most of us stand by, including myself. And I have to give all props to the writers of the character, as well as Josh Brolin for his brilliant performance as Thanos. Also, the motion capture for Thanos is incredible. It looks amazing. There's, like, not really a single frame in the film where I thought to myself that didn't look convincing. And what I also find so amazing is how, like, the detail is so specific. Like, he actually kind of looks like a huge, like, figure with real skin, and just the way, like, the camera moves and all of it. I can't give those people enough credit. So yeah, Thanos, 10 out of 10, hands down. Another actor that I want to give credit to is Peter Dinklage, who makes an awesome appearance as Eitri, I think is how you say it. I'll spell it out on the screen for those who don't know. Yeah, Peter Dinklage is an awesome actor. I love that guy. I have seen Game of Thrones, for those of you who are asking. I won't talk about Game of Thrones, though, but, you know, he's an incredible actor in that show, and, like, his acting ability in this movie kind of shows that he can do, like, stuff that you never thought he could do. He plays a giant from this, like, dwarf planet, and I don't know, the scene that he's in is just so cool, but I think that he gives a great performance, even though we don't see him too much in the movie. He gives a great performance when he's there, and he's one of the most memorable moments about the movie, and he plays a central role to the story. And I like how, even though we don't see him too much, he's one of the most memorable parts of Infinity War. So yeah, shout out to Peter Dinklage for an awesome character and performance. The score from Alan Silvestri is as epic as ever. It's the same score that we hear in the Avengers, but I'm assuming there's also probably some new composition there, but it's an epic superhero score, and for this movie, perfect. Like, you really do see why they had to make an important epic score for the Avengers movie, because when you have a film this epic, you need to have a memorable score, because if you don't have a memorable score, the film kind of loses something. So yeah, Alan Silvestri, phenomenal score. There's really only a few more aspects I want to talk about before I dive into spoiler territory, which I'll get to in just a second. I like that this film has a much more gritty story than any other MCU movie we've had thus far. I mean, we've had some grittier stories that deal with more serious stuff, but this is kind of like the first time where, like, it's like, this is an apocalyptic film. Like, the end of the world could potentially happen in this movie, and the story feels very gritty. Like, there feels like there's huge stakes this time that previously we didn't feel were as huge. I just can't give these people enough credit for how incredible the story is. And, like, it shows you that, like, even though Marvel films are fun, and even when you have a lot of fun with all these characters you love so much together, they really can make a gritty story that makes you care a lot about what's going on. And I gotta give the writers all the props for that. You know, of course, I can't talk about Infinity War without talking about the incredible action sequences. You know, I won't go into it too much, as I'll probably dive more into it during the spoiler part of the review, but man, dude, the action sequences in this film, they knocked them out of the park. These are some of my favorite moments, not just in the Avengers franchise, but in the MCU in general, and these are all just some of my favorite action sequences in any film ever. Like, whenever you think about action movies that are, like, basically done perfectly in terms of all of its action sequences, Avengers: Infinity War has got to come to mind. It's one of the most well-done action movies ever made. I can't stress that enough. And, just everything about it. The choreography, the setup, the CGI, and the way the characters act in it, and the camera work as well. My God, dude. They couldn't have done a better job with it, honestly. I got to give them all the props for that. And the last part I'm going to talk about before I go into the spoiler section is the mostly consistent CGI. There's really only one frame, or I guess 2 frames in the film that the CGI kind of bothers me, and that's the stuff with the Hulk Buster. Now, whenever the Hulk Buster is like in its hole, it looks fine, but whenever it had the helmet come off and you saw Banner's head sticking out of it, it didn't look very good. Aside from those scenes, the CGI for the most part is phenomenal. You gotta give them all the credit for that. So from this point on in the review, I'm going to talk about spoiler stuff, and I figured that for Avengers Infinity War, the best way to review it is to talk about it like spoilers and all. So if you have not seen the movie for whatever reason, yeah, just click off the video at this point because you do not want this film spoiled for you. You have been warned. So I'm not gonna go into this film as like a scene-by-scene analysis. I just have a bunch of scenes listed out that I personally want to talk about because they're personal to me and I thought they were interesting. First off, I've already warned you, we're going into spoilers at this point. Loki's death at the beginning of the film. Now, this is an interesting one for me because Loki is one of the most, like, how do I say it, like, complex characters in the entire MCU. At first you don't like him, then you start to like him just a little bit more, and there's a lot of complexity within the character, as I've discussed in all my reviews, which Loki comes out in those movies, especially Thor Ragnarok. You know, he was becoming really likable in the last movie we saw him in Thor Ragnarok, and the fact that he died here actually made me kind of sad. But the question is, though, is he even really dead? Because he technically died in Thor the Dark World, but then he didn't really die. So then the question is Loki really dead? We'll see, but as for now, Loki is actually dead, and like, I didn't cry or anything, but it still made me sad, and to see like Thor's reaction in front of it, the fact that like Chris Hemsworth actually like shed a tear during that scene, that's amazing acting, man, and it just made me sad to see Loki die, honestly. And of course, I forget if this was before Loki or after Loki. I think it was after Loki, but it's like the same sequence. Was Heimdall's death in the same scene. And now Heimdall was really more of a supporting character in the Thor franchise, but he played an important role to the Thor mythology, and so to see him die made me kind of sad because, you know, just how cool he was as a character, and, you know, but I don't even have any words for it, if I'm being completely honest. I think we should just move on. So, of course, the huge spoiler for this movie, as if there's not multiple, but the huge spoiler is the blip. So, if you guys don't know, the blip is where Thanos snaps the Infinity Gauntlet and half the universe is killed, and we lose quite a lot of characters. I got it all listed. We lose Bucky, we lose Falcon, we lose every single Guardian of the Galaxy except for Rocket. We lose T'Challa, Peter Parker, Wanda, Nick Fury. We lose Maria Hill, and also Doctor Strange, man. Now, I was honestly really shocked when this film came out in theaters that we lost that many characters, because to be completely honest, I didn't think that Infinity War was going to end with Thanos getting all the stones. I thought it was just going to end with him getting maybe half of the stones, and then Endgame was going to end with him trying to get the other half or something. But no, Infinity War ended with Thanos getting every single stone and killing off half the universe. And not gonna lie, like, I was watching this movie last night, and I cried a little bit when the blip happened, because it just reminded me of how much I love all these characters, and to see them all die like that really just broke my heart. But like, the story is so well done that I can't really get mad at it. And what I find interesting is that the only people who survived the blip are all of the original Avengers, so Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Rocket, and also War Machine. Every single, like, original, well, I guess Rocket's not an original Avenger, but every single original Avenger plus Rocket were the only people who survived, which I think is insane. Like, I think it's kind of insane, the fact, like, how selective it almost kind of feels like the blip was, even though it happens at random. But it's also kind of interesting how, like, at the end of the day, our original crew is the one who survived. It's ultimately going to become down to them to save all this stuff and to fix it, which is kind of interesting, considering that, like, this is their destiny. So I kind of like how the writers wrote that in there. Another death that we have is the death of Vision, and I didn't write him in the blip because if you guys seen the movie, he doesn't die in the blip. He dies because he gets the stone ripped out of his head. And I actually didn't realize how much Vision's death was going to affect me, which actually goes into my next thing I have listed here, was Wanda breaking my heart. Now, I feel like this probably is a lot better in retrospect, considering what they've done with Wanda in Phase 4, which I won't go into, as those are future spoilers, and I'm just talking about this movie. But, like, in retrospect, with everything they've done with Wanda in Phase 4, I looked back and I, like, teared up a little bit when I saw the heartbreaking story go down between her and Vision. It made me just realize how much I love these characters, and how seeing them die is just... It breaks your heart. It really does, and I know that I keep saying that over and over again, but, like, it was such a shock when it happened that, like, even though I know that it's happening all these years later watching it, I still, like, my body still, like, doesn't, like, know that it's coming. It's still not ready for it, so I just find it incredible how, like, all these years later I can still get genuine shock and emotion out of it. Talking about a more lighthearted part of the spoilers, we're talking about Thor. Now, I like the way Thor's story arc goes from Ragnarok into this movie. We got to see him get his eye back, so that was cool. And he has a new hammer now, which is, or the Stormbreaker actually is awesome. But my favorite thing they did with Thor in this movie, which I'm sure is probably everyone's favorite scene, was his intro to Wakanda with Groot and with Rocket. Man, that's such a inspirational scene. It's such a just like it gets the blood pumping. It's so exciting that like whenever I was watching it, I was like cheering like in my living room watching this film. It's like, oh, it's just so cool, and the way the score swells and the part where Thor is like, bring me Thanos, and everything that happens after that, and seeing Thor getting this close to killing Thanos is like some of the best stuff that I've seen in the MCU, and I just every time I watch it I always geek out. I just love it so much. And Thor is my second favorite Marvel superhero behind Captain America. And just the stuff they do with Thor in this movie is awesome. I think Chris Hemsworth, like, it goes to show you that they really could not have picked a better actor to play him. Going back to the sad stuff, I have Gamora listed here, and I have two things listed about her. First I'll talk about her backstory. I'm not going to go deep into the backstory, as that's not the point of this video. But they show more about her backstory that we didn't previously know in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that with her relationship with Thanos, which I didn't even realize, and I feel like that just makes what happens with her so much more saddening and gut-wrenching than it already was. And that's the fact that Thanos sacrificed her soul to get the Soul Stone. Seeing Thanos hurl Gamora off that cliff, it still sends shock to me watching it these years later, which is insane. It just makes you feel so much more worse for her. Had they not showed the backstory in the film, I mean, I would have found it sad, but not nearly as sad as I did. If this movie did anything well, it was making the fans sad. As much as I hate to say that a Marvel movie made me sad, it did. But I don't mind it because of how well made it was, and also because of how awesome and epic some of the other scenes are. Oh, and speaking of Gamora getting her soul taken away, I gotta talk about the return of Red Skull. This is our first time seeing Red Skull since Captain America: The First Avenger, and it's so cool. It's so cool for me as a Captain America fan to see that Red Skull's legacy moved beyond the first movie, and he actually had, like, a central part to this whole saga outside of just the first movie, and I feel like that makes him so much more of a better villain than he was previously, and I love it. Enough said. There's also some continuing story arcs from previous movies that I love. I love seeing Bucky's relationship with T'Challa, especially considering how rocky they were rivals in Captain America: Civil War, and it's cool to see these two characters acknowledge each other's mistakes and make peace. And I love seeing them move forward in order to save the world. I love seeing Steve also make amends with T'Challa, Steve Rogers, which is so cool because they were also at odds during Captain America: Civil War, not as much as T'Challa and Bucky, but it was cool to see the two of them make amends, and especially get this man a shield. Oh, I still to this day love that scene. I'm geeking out about it right now in front of this camera because I just can't express how much I love seeing these two characters who are at opposing ends come together for the better of mankind. It's such an inspirational moment. It's just an awesome moment between these characters. And I also love T'Challa's arc in this film after Black Panther. I love the arc that starts in Civil War through Black Panther and then through Infinity War. The way that he changes as a person. We see in Black Panther there's much more behind him than we see in Civil War. And that he's a peaceful man and he just wants to be a good ruler and a good king. And this shines through in Avengers Infinity War. It was so awesome to see him make amends with people he previously had issues with for the better of Wakanda, for the better of the world. And it's just such a brilliant way, in my opinion, for them to continue the arc of Black Panther, and Chadwick Boseman plays it beautifully. May the late great rest in peace. I also love Hulk's arc after Ragnarok. Hulk had an interesting arc in Thor Ragnarok where he was Hulk for 2 years, and then he became Banner again, and he turned into the Hulk after falling onto the bridge, which I find hilarious. And now Banner can't turn into the Hulk, which is so convenient considering that the world's literally about to end and he needs his power more than ever now, and he just can't help it. And we get cool scenes out of the Hulk Buster, which is cool enough, but man, it kind of just makes you feel for Banner. It's like he went through such an interesting arc. We see Banner's arc start off with him having to keep his anger under control, otherwise he turns into the Hulk, and we see him struggling with his anger issues, and we see him turn into the Hulk for 2 years. Then we see him have a mix there, and now we're seeing this guy who gets angry not turn into the Hulk. And it's such a great arc, and I just love the fact that Banner, even though we don't see him too much in this franchise outside of being one of the Avengers, he has an arc. And I find that really important. I'm glad they do that to him. I also have Doctor Strange listed. Not necessarily because Doctor Strange has any... I'm lying. He does have huge important moments in this movie. It's cool to see him evolve past the first Doctor Strange movie, as well as him and Wong. And I like the fact that he actually has a central role to the story about him knowing the amount of outcomes and him having the time stone. And him knowing the information that he does and seeing him trying to pull stuff together, I just think the way they incorporated him with all these characters is great, considering that prior to Infinity War and Thor Ragnarok, we don't see that Strange has any tie to these characters. I thought they tied him in really well. Speaking of tying stuff in really well, for the first time ever, the Guardians of the Galaxy meet these other characters. It was interesting for me to see the Guardians of the Galaxy meet the Avengers, because when I first saw this, especially in the first trailer, I thought to myself that it was so weird to see all these characters like in the same shot together. And it really was. However, at the same time, it was so cool to see these characters like who don't know each other come together because they all have one goal in common, and that's to stop Thanos. And even though they struggle to work together, you can tell they want to work together, and it's a cool dynamic. And I thought it was interesting, weird, and awesome to see these characters who previously never met in the same scene together. I'll have a few stuff left I want to talk about because I don't want this video to get too long. Another scene that I love is the scene where I believe it's at not Avengers Tower, but the Avengers facility, where we have Steve, Rhodey, Natasha, Banner, Sam, Wanda, and Vision all meeting together, making amends after the fact that these characters were at odds in Captain America Civil War. And I was just happy to see that these characters could grow beyond just the government forcing them into rivalries. I like the fact that they could come together when push comes to shove. And I think the writers and the actors just pull it off so well. Like this movie with this many actors in it that we've previously met before, it really does go to show you that they could not have had better people to play these characters. Like, I don't think there's a single miscasting of these characters that we see in this film. And it just goes to show you that, like, even if we don't see them all too much in previous movies, certain characters at least, they really made the right choice to cast these actors, and I just can't give the casting people enough credit. And the last thing I want to talk about is the Infinity Stones. Not that I have all that much to talk about with them, but we have the Power Stone, the Space Stone, the Reality Stone, the Soul Stone, the Time Stone, and the Mind Stone. So that's 6 stones, and it's just interesting for me to see how Thanos going after these stones, like his goal that he has, is like, it's a scary goal, but it's a goal that ultimately does make sense for him. And it's weird because he's doing this huge scary thing, but he's doing it for a supposed good reason. And I find it really great how they didn't just make Thanos some scary just tyrant, how him going after the stones actually has a deeper meaning than that, and the fact that from his point of view, he believes that he's correct, which is terrifying, but they make it to a point where you actually understand it. And I just think it was done brilliantly. Like, I think this is probably the best that an Infinity War movie could have been. I can't give it enough credit. I think that's all I have to say about it. I love Avengers Infinity War. This is one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's not just that. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And actually, I forgot to write down the rating and the grade, but it doesn't matter because I already know. Avengers Infinity War, without a doubt, gets a 10 out of 10 because it's so entertaining, and no doubt gets an A+. It's a phenomenal movie. It's one of the best superhero movies ever made, arguably the best according to some people, and I think it's just one of the best action movies ever made. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Avengers Infinity War. I know it's structured a lot differently than previous Marvel movies, but I figured for Avengers Infinity War, I had to do it, and if the structure's a little bit messy, I apologize. I hope that I can fix that with maybe some later Marvel movies that I might structure similarly to this, but I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified about latest videos, leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought, and make sure you tune into my channel just a few more days to see my review of the next Marvel Cinematic Universe film, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and yeah, it's been it. Peace.